So it appears that Sam Altman listens to the podcast. I think we're being trolled by him. We spent a good, I don't know what it was it half an hour last week talking about the terrible plight of image generation in
Yeah,
AI land. And as if
yeah.
by magic, I think it was the next day after the podcast landed, a whole new generation of image generation modeling landed and changed the way that this whole thing works. And I don't know. What do you think? Is he on the wind up? Is Sam our biggest fan?
I think he's definitely listening because it wasn't just the image generation, was it? It was also the MCP stuff as well, which perhaps we'll touch on later because I think that's pretty fascinating stuff. But yeah, I mean, the day after we did the last one, Google came out with their new experimental image model, which did text, and I had a go with it. It wasn't very good.
Mm-hmm.
And then yesterday, I think it was yesterday, OpenAI dropped their new image model, and all of a sudden the internet blew up with your pictures of people in Ghibli style and random cartoons and videos, and
Yeah.
it's just amazing.
I've seen a lot of images of people as the Simpsons. That seems to be quite popular. That's doing the rounds. My WhatsApp is full of Simpsons mods.
Yeah, I did. I turned you into a Simpson. That was good. I had a much better idea after the fact. Actually, I thought you looked much better as Bender off Futurama.
Futurama's a great one. I've not tried that. That's
Try
a
it
good
later.
idea. Yeah, no, I had a little play with that. This is not going to be all about images today, by the way. We've done images, but I did have a little play. And one of the things I was really impressed with, one of the things I wasn't really impressed with is it still can't tell the time. So we're not going to get into that again. It's still always 10 past 10 in AI land. But one thing I was really impressed with, and maybe this is related to the things we were talking about last week, is that you can now change the image. If you ask it to present you change a photo into a copy of, so it looks like The Simpsons, and it's got something a little bit wrong, you can ask it to change the colour of the hat. And the rest of the image stays the same, and the hat changes colour.
Yeah, well, this is the thing, isn't it? Yes, I think last time we had this big moan about the fact that image models were rubbish. They couldn't do anything to do with character consistency, couldn't tell the time, couldn't do text, and now it's all changed. And I think we also touched upon this concept of multi-instance diffusion models, where you have these language models that have a concept of different things in the scene. And they can kind of iterate on them independently. When OpenAI's new image model dropped, I wondered if that's what it was doing. And long story short, it is, but not quite. So
Right.
I don't think it is a multi-instance diffusion model in the true sense, but it does build up the image using composition. So internally, you can think of it a bit like something like Illustrator or Photoshop, where it's building up this image in layers, and it has a concept of what's on each layer, and it can kind of change that. It doesn't work quite like that. It kind of promptifies these layers to rebuild them, but it does achieve huge new levels of consistency, and stylistically, it's streets ahead. I think it's going to change the game in a big way for a lot of creative kind of image type stuff.
I think certainly what it's going to do is make that very niche business of the Etsy producer. That there was a specialist band of them that could turn your dog into a Simpsons dog, and you can have them put on a T-shirt. And there was one or two of them. There's going to be a lot more of them. I think their value is going to zero. I think this is probably more evidence actually that Sam Altman listens to the pod, that this kind of diffusion idea, because even the animation, the way that it reveals the image to you, which I assume is entirely faked, is a kind of it kind of appears out of the pixelated mist, and it sort of appears gradually rather than a big bang. So I think it's more evidence that Sam listens.
Well, yeah. So the other evidence is, we had a big long chat about MCP last week, and I think it was yesterday again. A bit later on, a bit later on in the evening, they dropped the image model in the morning, and then in the evening, the dev forum announced that they were going to integrate MCP into OpenAI's new APIs for agents, and also in the coming months into ChatGPT itself. And this is huge news, right? So MCP was a standard, an open standard, but it was developed by Anthropic, which are essentially a competitor. So OpenAI adopting that standard just shows you how much it's become a thing, and how popular it's become, and we touched upon that last week. I think it's probably worth exploring what MCP is a little bit more, because we've been quite vague about it in the past.
Yeah. And this was another thing you called months ago. You said MCP, this is the one to watch.
Yeah, so MCP, I was actually chatting to one of our guys about this, because we're trying to organise these kind of meetings where the architects get together with commercial and kind of setting the tone in terms of the level at which you've got to pitch it to help people understand. And so we were kind of spitballing these ideas about kind of what MCP really was. And I thought my version of it was much cooler than his, but we'll go with both. We'll go with both to see which one lands better. The way I think of it is a bit like the Matrix, and Neo from the Matrix. So he gets fished out of the robotic incubator and freed, and then he has to kind of level up, right? So he comes out not knowing a whole load of stuff, and he needs to learn a load of stuff to be able to understand and take on the Matrix. They stick a big tube in the back of his head, and they download a load of stuff, and all of a sudden he wakes up and goes, I know Kung Fu.
Ooh.
And I think for me that's quite an easy way to explain MCP and how it can augment LLMs and tools like ChatGPT and Claude and coding tools like Cursor, and give them kind of new superpowers. So they know loads of stuff generally. They've got this kind of big digital brain, but there's loads of specific stuff they don't know how to navigate. So an example of that could be your Google spreadsheet. You've got a specific Google spreadsheet about a load of stuff and a load of business logic that you've encoded in there, and out the box, your chat app doesn't know how to work with spreadsheets. So you can upload files, but it doesn't know how to natively understand or work with spreadsheets. By giving your chat app access to an MCP server, a special MCP server, it's like giving Neo access to that training course. The chat app now has a way to understand and interact with something it didn't know before. So in the Google Sheets example, you give it an MCP server that can talk to Google Sheets and specifies various ways in which it can be prompted and it can be modified, how you read a cell, how you write a cell, that kind of thing. You've all of a sudden given your chat app the superpowers to reason over a Google Sheet. And that's the important piece of the puzzle, actually. It's not just that it can now read and write cells in a spreadsheet under your direction. It's that it can use its own intelligence, and when it decides and how it decides, it can call upon its MCP tools and its new superpowers to do stuff with that spreadsheet. So it's combining its native intelligence with a superpower ability to go off and do a specific thing. And there are MCP servers for everything now. There's a website that I was pointed at earlier this week called, I think it's smithery.ai. Nothing to do with me. But it's got like 2,500 MCP servers on there and counting. So yeah, it's growing and growing and growing, and obviously Sam Altman's now come out and said it's going to be baked into ChatGPT as well. Now the other analogy I had was, actually it's not like Neo, not quite like Neo, it doesn't quite work like that. It's more like you've got a subject matter expert with you all the time. So if I'm the LLM, I'm the chat app, and I want to understand how to fix my boiler, I don't know how to do that. I know nothing about the ins and outs of boilers and my specific boiler and how to access it and what's wrong with it and all that kind of stuff. But if I wheel in an MCP, which is my subject matter expert, it could be the boiler man, and he's there kind of with me through the whole thing. I can say, right, I want to do this. I need to diagnose the problem with my boiler. The boiler man tells me how I can go about doing that. And then under his instruction, I then go off and I work out how to fix my boiler. So yeah, it depends how you want to look at it. I think kind of the more accurate way of looking at it, if you want to understand what's going on under the hood and how it's actually working, is probably like the LLM has access to a subject matter expert that it kind of uses when it needs to. But the kind of easier and cooler way, I think, is just, yes, It's Neo with the tube in the head.
I did see what I thought was a pretty good example of this. It was a new startup, and the name escapes me, but it was at MWC, Mobile World Congress, and there was quite a bit of buzz around it. Maybe last week, earlier this week, and it was a startup that booked holidays, right? So the idea was that a bit like Airbnb, I suppose. You give it some information, and it will go off and it will book you the holiday that you want. It's a bit similar to the story we told, the agentic me, right? So there's a startup that wants to do it now. Their product connects with partners via an API, right? So the agent says, right, okay, you want a nice apartment with a pool in this country for this kind of price, right? I'm going to look at all of my partners I've got API access to, and I'm going to use the API to find the right place, make a decision on your behalf, and book it. But it goes a stage further, and it actually has another tool in its toolbox, which just got a browser, and it can connect to non-partners using the web browser to go through the usual web journey to use whatever it is, booking.com or something, to pull out matches which match your criteria, compare it to the ones that are in its partner database, and make a decision on your behalf. And if it decides that it wants one that's not connected via an API or not connected via its partner network, it can just book that for you anyway, because it's using the browser agent to take you down that journey as well. And so the idea is, I guess, and where I'm coming around to is, they're using MCP, but behind the scenes, they've been given the task of book me a holiday that meets my criteria. And it's either going to use one tool set or it's going to use the other, depending on how it reasons to decide how to solve that given problem. So that's a real kind of genuine, kind of real world example that's come out right now, which kind of brings it maybe a little bit more concrete.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that's the thing about the whole kind of agentic movement, I suppose, for want of a better word. It's a whole new way of thinking about stuff, isn't it? You're essentially you're creating software that you're then having to shepherd and constrain and instruct via tooling. Like, it has native intelligence. It can just make stuff up and go and do stuff, but you don't want it to always do that. In fact, you rarely want it to do that. So we're entering this world where, when you're creating software, it's all about constraining what it can do and giving it tools so that when it does do the things, it always does them in a consistent way, which is really weird when you think about where we are now, where you've got pretty much all software is completely deterministic and it won't do anything that you specifically don't tell it to do. So it's a very different way of thinking about how to solve a problem. And it's kind of where kind of behaviors like chain of command and following orders and stuff like that really matter more than a huge long list of instructions that tell the software how to work.
Yeah, it's about, as you say, I think, setting constraints rather than setting the rails. We're no longer going to be setting the rails. We're going to be setting the boundaries from which it can act within, and kind of give it the amount of freedom. And I saw kind of explained the other day, or suggested that actually when AI is giving you bad results, whether that's from the code that you're writing or some other prompt that you're trying to generate, it's actually it's a deliberate land grab. So you haven't been good enough with your constraints, therefore it's reaching out and overreaching deliberately to try and take as much space as it possibly can. I don't know if that's actually true, but it's an interesting analogy, because if you don't contain it, it can just go wild, right?
Yeah, and I don't know what my thinking is on this yet, because you've got these models, the really big ones that predominantly are being used, and they're like super intelligent PhD philosophy majors that want to be super helpful. So they'll help you think all the possible options, and they'll always ask you if you want more, and they'll always fill in the gaps when you don't have anything or you haven't been specific enough. And it's like, okay, that's good, but now we're not, when we're trying to build software and we're trying to build agentic software, I would like an LLM that's a bit dumber and will just follow some orders, right? Don't make too much stuff up. Like, just,
can we dial it back a bit?
Yeah, we dial it back a bit. It's a bit like when somebody goes off and joins the services. they're fine-tuned. The human is fine-tuned to follow chain of command, respect chain of command, and follow orders. And you kind of want a fine-tuned model that doesn't try to be overly helpful or just make stuff up when it can't meet its goal.
I guess we'll see where that ends up. What do you think of the significance of OpenAI using Anthropic's, or taking Anthropic's lead on and using their open standard? It's a really interesting development, I think. You know, is this a kind of more broadly a coming together of different entities, or is it kind of a frenemies kind of thing? Like, well, we're gonna advance quicker because their standard's pretty good, and the one we're working on, well, it is not, because they must have been working on something, right? There's something going on that we're unaware of behind the scenes. So there's like, well, this one's got some traction, so we might as well run with it. It's an interesting development, isn't it?
It is and it isn't. So yeah, initially, I suppose that would be the predominant thought. It's like, okay, well, were OpenAI essentially forced to adopt an open standard being championed by a potential competitor because it's now become so ubiquitous that if they didn't do it, they'd feel the heat? Because I'm someone who really, really wants MCP within ChatGPT like yesterday. And I'm really frustrated that I can't get it and I have to use all these other tools. So I can't be the only one. So there's that aspect. Did they just kind of go, oh, well, you know, we have no choice now? But then if you take a step back and you look kind of more broadly at what's always happened within this industry, it's fairly normal for this kind of stuff to happen. I don't know if I'm going to get this wrong now or not, but I think PyTorch, which is pretty much the underlying framework that all kind of machine learning outfits use, and all these AI companies are using. I think pretty much, with the exception of Google, everybody uses this to train their models and build software to help develop those models. That was originally written by Meta, I think.
Right.
And then the Meta open sourced it, and now it's looked after by a community. And then if you look back, like even kind of .NET, which was developed by Microsoft, is now being open sourced. When they develop an open standard, it benefits the whole kind of tech ecosystem. And I think Anthropic were pioneering, and they were brave to put that out there. And I think we should, probably going to owe them a debt of gratitude for doing it.
I guess what's really fascinating is just the pace. I mean, if you think how long it took Microsoft to open source .NET, for example, the speed at which MCP has appeared on the radar, become dominant, and now been open source. So for the slightly less technical of our audience, is MCP ready? Is it? I guess the question, if there's a CIO or a CTO in the, listening to this, and they've heard about this MCP thing, they don't quite know where it should go or what it should do. Is it ready to start deploying and using in production environments, or is it a tool to play with and research with and experiment with?
So they are still developing the standard. It's actually quite a small piece of the puzzle. So is MCP ready? Yes, it probably is. But are the guardrails well understood? Probably not. And is the whole kind of agentic development piece, is it mature enough to roll out into production? At the moment, I think that's a difficult call to make. But what's interesting, I suppose, is when you try and use one of these MCP servers with a Claude, for instance, it will, every time it goes, the LLM decides it needs to go off and use one of these tools that's exposed by this MCP, it prompts you to go, are you sure? Are you sure you want to do this? And then and every time you install one, you have to click a load of disclaimers, because if you're giving the LLM the power to go and start looking at your spreadsheets and writing to them, then you could get in a lot of trouble very quickly, right? Yeah. So it does give them these superpowers. It's like Neo, right? You give him kung fu, and you're not careful about how he uses that, and he could do some serious damage. So yeah, I think the guardrails are important, and I think it's very early. That's still being worked through. But it's a good question, because we're building a lot of APIs at the moment, and I was having this chat with somebody just this week, suggesting that actually for this new piece of work, it would make sense to start exposing some of the stuff in the underlying data fabric, if you like, via MCP so that we could start developing tools and interacting with that data in a kind of more natural way than we are at the moment. So I think we're right on the cusp. I think this year, people should be looking at it based on everything we've seen so far. Emerging standards, it's still really new. You're still probably in the early adopter stage.
It sounds like the technology's close, but maybe the governance layer and the understanding of the constraints that need to be applied and how to do that. It's going to be about context, isn't it? As you say, startups, they've got a clean slate; they can run at it and do what they like. An enterprise organisation is in a slightly different boat. It reminds me, actually, I was going to tell you a story, a little made-up story, a little friendly story about a kingdom. And this is going somewhere. It's a kingdom.
A kingdom.
A kingdom. It's not a fairy tale kingdom. No, it's a real life, our own kingdom. You might call it the United Kingdom. Now, yesterday, at time of recording, we had something called the Spring Statement. Now, we're not going to get overly political about this, don't worry. But they did bring up one thing, which comes up in every time there's one of these kind of economic events. They bring up efficiency and how governments are going to use, whatever's available to drive efficiency. And obviously the flavour of the month is AI. AI is going to drive efficiency. Unfortunately, there are some issues with this right now in an organisation, like the government. So in the modern day realm of the United Kingdom, this bold vision was cast of how AI was going to change the world. Leaders were declaring that it's time to unlock this amazing power. Artificial intelligence was going to transform our public services. They're going to make them run more smoothly. They're going to increase productivity. We're going to have a smarter, more dynamic government because of the wonders of AI. Incredible promise, incredibly exciting. Imagine a public sector, I suppose, which is mega productive. The forms just fill themselves in. This is incredible. And citizens, feel
struggling.
like...
I've got to be honest, I'm struggling here.
Citizens feel like they're being seen, and served, not just kind of processed. The data's flowing around seamlessly. So the call goes out. Okay, the call goes out. We're going to modernise. We're going to bring in AI. When the government put the call out, the various departments found it very difficult to answer that call. But why? Why could they not answer that call? Well, because there's no data. Or, more to the point, there is data. It does exist, but it's written in an old format. It's locked away somewhere in some forgotten system that's decades old and no one quite understands how it works. These departments are operating maybe technology it may as well be tablets of stone. It's so legacy. It's decades old. And even the data they do manage to collect, often they just lose it. It's the efficiency built into the system makes it impossible to realise some of these gains. And then even more than that, these magicians that are supposed to make it all happen, the data scientists or maybe the technical architects, can't find the skills of these special wizards. These skills don't exist to enable departments to wield this new power which has been promised. So off the back of it, one of the budget responsibilities, and this is in the FT, basically came out and said, look, 60% of government agencies are going to struggle to access the high quality data that's required to make this thing happen. 70% of the same agency says they can't find the skilled staff to bring this AI vision to life. It's not a technology problem, it's more of an infrastructure problem, a leadership problem, a skills problem. It's a much bigger problem that's kind of always, I guess, been there. And it plagues not just governments, but large institutions, big enterprise organizations, those mature IT teams, existing organizations. And you end up with this, is it paradoxical? You kind of got this paradoxical conflict between, on the one hand, the AI startup bros, I suppose, that are constantly talking about AI eating the world and everything's going to be replaced and MCP or whatever the next new thing is going to come over and do everything. It's exciting, cool new stuff. But we know there's lots of things that are holding back large organizations, mature IT teams, enterprise IT, governments from actually embracing these things. And they are because there are thousands of applications around that should have been decommissioned decades ago, but somehow still managed to work, although no one's quite sure how. There's heavy regulation, regulation everywhere. That's either going to mean if there's a mistake made, there's obviously big risk. heavy fines, maybe someone's going to prison. Entire departments in these places are dedicated to slowing things down, to make things safer, because they want to mitigate that operational risk. And obviously in public listed organisations as well, you've got every major technology decision goes before the investors and comes under huge scrutiny. I mean, fundamentally, there's too much legacy, too many users, too many customers, too much revenue to protect, which means these things at this level are going to move much more slowly, I guess, than you see kind of the big headlines. And I wonder, we come across a lot of CIOs in our journeys, and you kind of see this stress and this tension building within them. The CIO of a large organization, typically they have been historically, they've been the enablers, right? The CIO is the enabler, they're the deliverer of the board strategy. But what this kind of AI journey, I guess, has done has really shone a light on some of those things which have always been there. Poor automation, poor quality of data, lack of skills in the right places, but kind of elevated them up to board level. And now all of a sudden the CEO or CFO is saying, come on, CIO, stop enabling and delivering, and now you've got to come up with the strategy. You've now got to lead the way. And there's always this sense of tension. It's almost like reinvention stress or innovation stress, where the CIO is going, I don't know what to do. I can't move. And I think this is rife across all mature organisations. I really kind of see this. That transition is going to take much longer in those large organisations than it is in the brand new kind of startup AI first world, I suppose. And I guess as well, if you want to see any real progress in this space, if you're selling into this space, you need to align with the CIO now. That's the guy or the girl is really feeling the pressure and feeling this. So they're going to welcome people selling to them in this space because it help them solve a lot of these problems.
Yeah. Yeah, but again, I don't know if it's all that different from what's gone before. We still deal with people today who are almost working off pen and paper, or they've got literally a conversation I had yesterday where this business system that's responsible for paying out $2 million every month is run off the back of a spreadsheet with a load of VBA that no one understands and that's donkey's years old. So this has been a problem in technology adoption for yonks, and it's actually one of the things that perhaps makes me sleep a little bit easier at night because we are in the thick of this fast moving field where we're getting bombarded with all these kind of technology advances every week. But the one constant in this whole thing, and it has been for decades, is people and existing systems. And that is the mud that everything gets stuck in ultimately, isn't it? And that's what slows the adoption down. It's people, and it's their ability to move. I guess the CIOs in your story are probably anxious because it's that kind of fear of missing out almost, isn't it? It's like, well, if I don't do this now, then we're missing out on this additional revenue, or competitors are going to get the jump on us. And that's how you think, and it's probably how you should think, but often the reality is different. The reality is it just gets stuck. We'll be having this conversation 10 years later when there are robots flying around everywhere we've outsourced our brains entirely, and there'll be some company that we use regularly who's trying to arrange our mortgage, but they've fallen over because the handwritten letter that they insisted that was delivered has got lost.
Yeah. I mean, you can understand the fear though, I guess, because you haven't got to go back very far. There's something very similar has happened in our recent past, right? You think of the mobile first companies that ate alive the existing incumbents at the time. If you think, WhatsApp versus Skype, or Instagram versus Flickr, or likes of Uber, Airbnb, Spotify, these companies didn't exist before the mobile existed. They came in, they were mobile first, and then they took over the world. And so you can kind of see that kind of built-in fear that people don't want to be gobbled up. But you're right, there is a built-in inertia amongst these organizations. It's just people don't like change, but also, as I said, they're designed to not change. There are entire departments slowing these things down, removing operational risk, trying to protect what they've got. And it takes a really special kind of leadership team to push back against that, particularly when shareholder is king, right?
Protectionism is going to be a big thing, right? Because this, like any technology wave, but especially with this one, is going to have a big impact on the workforce. And ultimately, the board level will be looking to make efficiencies, which is a nice way of saying get rid of people because we can automate their job away. So, of course, especially in the public sector, of course, it's going to be a huge amount of protections. They're not going to want to do a load of work, which essentially proves that they can be automated, or a large part of what they do is made irrelevant.
Yeah, I saw two very real examples of that this week. One's kind of anecdotal, so maybe I'll start with that. A friend of mine is looking for a new job as an accountant. They're a very senior accountant, but are looking for a new job as an accountant. I will keep their identity a secret because I don't think their boss is aware. However, they've I'm sure their boss is an avid listener. So they've gone job hunting and they've had 6-7 interviews, various different places, and they said that these organisations, these accountancies, quite large firms, fall into two very distinct camps. One of them is actively exploring how this new technological wave is going to change the way their business is operating, to the point where they're removing junior roles, they're getting rid of admin and secretarial roles, keeping the senior people in place, but using basically the tooling, the bots, the dictation, the recordings, whatever, the automatic calculation stuff, all the spreadsheet bits and bobs, bringing all those things in to actively replace the junior roles. But on the other hand, you've still got the accountants that are sending stuff out in the post and asking for wet signatures. It's complete, and these are all mainstream large organizations that people would have heard of, falling very clearly into those two camps. Fascinating. The other one was slightly less anecdotal. Did you see this story? I was surprised this wasn't bigger news. Again, we felt like this is the OpenAI show today, but OpenAI did a deal with The Guardian. Did you see this?
I know about that. Yeah.
Did you see this? So they did a deal with The Guardian. I think it was this week. It was only very recently. I came across it this week, where The Guardian have basically sold access, official access, shall we say, to all of the Guardian's articles, publications, whatever. And I thought, that was really interesting. They're saying it's for training. That makes sense. Because, hopefully that stops the models making stuff up because they're being trained on real information. I got that. I did a little bit more digging. And it seems that The Guardian are not the only ones who have done this. All at the same time, Reuters have done it. AP have done it. News Corp have done it. Whoever runs the Eye has done it. The Mail has done it. And there's maybe a bit of a realization that all the data's out there anyway, so they might also get paid for it. Maybe there's something of it. And it's an interesting side note on what happened with Meta recently as well. We'll come back to that. So they've all done it. They've all sold these things out. And there's a little bit of pushback from the news unions, because they're starting to think, well, there's, if we're training them on real journalists, all of a sudden I can say, give me this news story in the style of this particular journalist. That's the one thing. But equally, they're also starting to deliver AI first services. As part of this deal, they are releasing a product which offers subscribers a summary of the news articles. So the original article is written by the journalist. That then goes into the tool, and you then get a summarized version of the article for the people who are time poor and they can't read the whole article. But the summary has still got the original byline, so you can see which journalist started. And there is an editor somewhere who's checking that it's not nonsense coming out. So there is a human still in the loop checking that. But all these summaries are being written by the AI and being sent out as a separate product that you can subscribe to. Now, this is actually a role that it was always available. Like, it was a person, a human did that role. They were called a sub-editor. And they used to create summaries of these things that get sent out to broadcast partners or whatever to kind of give you the gist of the story to help push the original article. But this does feel like the first real step I've seen publicly of jobs being replaced by essentially some AI tooling in an area where I thought, surely these are journalists, right? There'd be a lot more noise about it. But then I realised, actually, no, the journalists are owned by the media companies who are just trying to save money.
I think this is fascinating, though, because I wonder, as you were kind of talking there, is this another iTunes moment? Because Apple first brought out the iPod, everybody jumped on it and they're really keen to get their music up there and this another distribution channel. And then, a few years later, they looked around and they was like, oh, Apple's created this massive walled garden now, and they kind of own the music industry, and this isn't good. And so there was a lot of backlash against it, to the point where Apple essentially weren't trusted anymore. So that whenever they tried to do a new thing, whether it was the idea of the Apple TV and later the News Plus stuff, nobody's lining up to give them their content.
Mm.
The News Plus subscription thing that Apple has, it has a few publications on there, but it took them ages and ages to build that list up, and still the ones that you want on there aren't on there. The media outlets really, really wised up to this, to the point where CarPlay came out, and it's clearly better than in-house stuff, but they don't want to cede their dashboard to Apple, and so they're deliberately pushing, or did for a long time, deliberately push back against CarPlay and tried to build up their own kind of navigational systems and the better in-car entertainment systems and that kind of stuff. So I was fascinated then, as you were talking, about these media deals, but they're all being done almost behind closed doors.
Mm.
And I don't know I guess the intent is the models that have access to the most information are going to be the best models. So OpenAI has just opened its checkbook and is, trying to get any closed data it doesn't have access to, that it can't scrape off the internet. It's doing these massive deals with, a bit like Apple did with the music industry. But I'm really surprised that, organisations like The Guardian are kind of signing up to this when historically they've pushed back against every effort thus far to get at their content, so they can't sell it like first party.
Yeah, I went down the rabbit hole on this one and I started googling around, and I found some job adverts. They were quite old, but they were aimed at journalists to write content to train AI models, and that really felt like, I don't know, digging your own grave and can you bring your own shovel?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what's behind it. I mean, maybe they just realise the business model is broken. It's happening anyway, so it's a chance to cash in, or maybe it is an efficiency drive. The quicker they can get real journalists out of the loop and just get the AI to do it, maybe that's the way they're going to save money. I don't know. I saw this broke as well quite recently. Again, maybe I'm just behind the times, but Mark Zuckerberg was accused of stealing stuff recently to train Meta's AI models, and this all centered around. Now I'm going to get this name wrong. I think it's called LibGen. It's a very famous library of pirated books. So you can get it online from all distributable places, but you can basically go on there and find basically one of hundreds of thousands of publications that are all copyrighted, and you can download them and stick them in your e-reader, right? So it's like the Napster, if you're going to show your age, the Napster of books. I think it's LibGen. Anyway, Meta grabbed this and are using that clearly copyrighted information to train their model, and they got found out on it. And the defense was broadly, well, we didn't steal it. It was already stolen. So maybe that's handling stolen goods. I don't know. But
so it's such a minefield. So a couple of things along similar lines that I've kind of picked up on this week. So a new trade association, Comic Books UK, has been formed because they're worried about AI essentially stealing all of their content. And so they've created a new trade body to fight back against this copyright theft. Which you're thinking, okay, well, that makes a lot of sense. And then the very next day, you've uploaded images to ChatGPT. So, can I have this in the style of, Spider-Man comics or something like this? So it's kind of like, okay, well, yeah, this is like the just cause, and then this is the reality and how I really want to use the tool. And then the other thing that came across my radar was, Cloudflare.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they are tackling a problem that seems like a lot of people have now, especially if they're in the free software or open software space. So things like I don't know, GitHub or Wikipedia or that kind of thing. But they all need money, right? So every time you go on Wikipedia now, it's like, give me money. It costs money to keep the site going, and we don't have any. Give us money. And then meanwhile, you've got models like GPT that have probably downloaded and trained themselves in large part on all the stuff from Wikipedia. And I know what's the size of the donation that you think they made?
Yeah.
I don't know. But Wikipedia is an easy example, but there's loads of like code repositories, there's like travel websites, there's anything where there's data to be had. AI models and tool makers are hungry for it. So what they do is they launch these crawlers onto the internet that just go around trying to gobble up all this information and hive it away. So these AI web crawlers, and there's so many of them that they're like having to deal with a denial of service attack.
Yeah.
So these poor websites that haven't, not swimming in money, they're having to like work around the clock to try and fend off these AI crawlers. Cloudflare have come up with a solution for this called AI Labyrinth.
Right.
And this is this is an AI system that Cloudflare have launched to fight the AI web crawlers. So what it does is when it detects one of these things, it just starts creating random pages on the site it's trying to crawl. So it just keeps going around in circles and gets stuck in this kind of labyrinth of AI generated content. So you've got this kind of weird situation now. We've got AI fighting AI, which is probably a harbinger of things to come, isn't it?
A metaphor for the future.
Did you hear that? Did you hear that just then? No? That was the sound of the gaping void left by Apple's AI strategy. It's not surprised.
Nice.
Yeah. But honestly, what are they doing? What do you think?
Siri's been so the whole Siri AI update thing got formally officially delayed indefinitely, right? And that's the first time that's happened since something else. It's happened once before, but it's very rare. Like when Apple gives you a date, they hit it. So, and I'm in the Apple ecosystem. I'm quite an Apple fanboy, but I don't want to have to change the ecosystem because it's really convenient that all the devices work together. And I've been crying out for a new home pod thing that's like got Siri in it that works, and it's kind of does the stuff that, like when you talk to ChatGPT and you get the decent conversation. I want to do that, but I want to do that in Apple.
Yeah.
So I was really excited that, Apple were going to get on this journey, and they're nowhere. They're absolutely nowhere.
No, and heads have rolled. I don't know if you heard, but this week they sacked or moved sideways the head of AI at Apple, and he's now been replaced this week by the guy that led the Vision Pro project.
Because that's been seen as a massive success.
I don't know. Who knows if that's a good outcome? But I guess Vision Pro did ship.
I guess it did hit its deadline.
Yeah. The fact that AI has been an AI upgrade to Siri, which is desperately needed, has been delayed now till 2027. I mean, that's an age in the kind of AI world that we're living in at the moment.
And
it's unconscionable, and you wonder what is going on at Apple. I'm an Apple fanboy too, and I'm kind of worried about this because I always look to the past to try and understand what's happening in the future. And we talked about this a little bit before, but back in the day when the mobile phones were, smartphones were just sort of coming out, I was a massive fan of the Windows Phone. In fact, we even had developed a little app, and it was in the top 10 in the Windows Store.
I remember it well.
Yeah, that shows you how poorly the uptake was on Windows Phone. Essentially, it was really, really cool. They developed a whole new user experience called Metro based on signage. It appealed to people like myself who developed in that Microsoft ecosystem. And there was nothing fundamentally wrong with it. It just really, really struggled to get any traction in the market. And so they tried for years, but they were late to the party. iOS was already there, Android was already there, Windows Phone were late to the party. And the failed launch after failed launch, they had about 2 or 3 attempts. And then if you remember, eventually they just they thought, well, let's just do something a bit, let's buy Nokia. That'll fix it, let's buy Nokia. So they bought a Nokia, and then they drove that into the ground. And eventually they went, we're not doing phones. We can't do phones. We'll stop. And I'm really worried now, having built my entire ecosystem around Apple, that are they just about to go through the same fated journey? Their visionary leader departed us some years ago. They've got a caretaker CEO. It's very similar to the Windows Phone era. Bill Gates left, Steve Ballmer came in, and they've missed big on AI. They didn't see it coming. Then they made a load of promises about embracing it and bringing it to Siri, which they've missed again. Now they're talking about 2 years until we get that. 2 years! Yeah. Everybody's used to using GPT and Copilot even to get stuff done. Amazon's come out with their refreshed Alexa, and Apple are going to be 2 years behind. This could be a massive blow to Apple. Have they messed up? Have they done what Microsoft did when they missed the fact that smartphones were going to be a big thing, and they just got there too late? You know. And they, in the end, they just had to give up on it. And in the end, they bought Nokia and they drove that into the ground. So are Apple going to have to bail out and partner with somebody and cede a whole bunch of their business? That's not a very Apple thing to do, is it?
No. I'm kind of surprised they haven't done that already. I mean, there was a very early talk of them working with OpenAI. Do you remember when OpenAI teamed up with Microsoft, and they seem to have performed this masterstroke of somehow they're providing what they're providing for Microsoft, which is basically cornered the enterprise market. But at the same time, they launched this kind of integration of sorts with Apple and the iOS ecosystem, which would enable them to corner the consumer market as well, because obviously Apple's got the distribution there. So it seems like a really obvious connection to just use ChatGPT, just use OpenAI. Like, why are they not doing it? But you're right, it's not a very Apple thing to do. And the way they've integrated OpenAI is very it feels stopgap. It feels like, oh, okay, you can use it, but it's a very kind of high level integration. So yeah, it links back, I think, to where we started when we had this conversation about mobile first winning. Obviously OpenAI are the definition of an AI first company, whereas obviously Apple is not, right? And okay, it took a bold person to say Apple's going to go to zero, considering they're probably still the biggest company, or very close to the biggest company on the planet still. But they're certainly not an AI first company. And you're right, if they're 2 years away from their reinvention, significant damage is going to be done. And it took Microsoft. I mean, Microsoft have recovered pretty well since those difficult days, and mainly obviously driven by what's happened with this year, the cloud space. But it took them a long time to kind of pick themselves up off the floor and go again. You kind of wonder if Apple are going to go through that cycle.
Yeah, definitely. And the other stuff you're hearing with these companies that aren't AI first, I think your comment on OpenAI is interesting, because these other bigger companies have been doing stuff in AI for years. Google and actually Meta developed loads and loads of stuff under the radar, and Google especially, they almost invented the field, right? With DeepMind, and the first people to beat the Go champions and that kind of thing. But you've got them really struggling in this consumer space. So when Amazon said, well, we're going to upgrade Alexa and give it all these kind of LLM smarts, that wasn't like instant. So ChatGPT was released in 2022, and Alexa came out a couple of months ago. And you listen to the lead guy on that project, and he's like, yeah, it's not easy. You can't just turn this thing on overnight, because we've got loads of people that have been built up over years that have Alexa, and they want it to work in a certain way, and they want it to keep doing all the things it used to do and in the way that it used to do them. We've also got a whole bunch of stuff we have to think about in terms of, what it should be allowed to do and shouldn't be allowed to do. We need to make sure it doesn't go off the rails. We still need to be able to buy stuff off Amazon and not rinse the credit cards, and all the automations that are hooked up still need to be able to work. So there was a huge amount of engineering to replumb this thing and rethink it. And I don't know what the result was, but they probably had to rebuild it all from the ground up, and that's why it took so long. And you can make the leap, and they're going to have to do the same thing with Siri, or they're trying to do the same thing with Siri, and they've just realised how big a task that is. And that's what these companies with history are fighting, right? They've got stuff that they've got to re-engineer. It's like that. It's turning the ship around. It takes such a long time to turn a battleship around. Whereas if you're starting from scratch, like OpenAI did, you get the leap and you get the momentum, and you can be a bit braver, and you can break things, and because there's nothing to break in the first place.
You've got no revenue to protect.
What you've got to lose. And it is like these mobile first companies. They were going after an entirely new audience with entirely new products, or They saw massive inefficiencies in the way that things were being done, and the fact that you could bring it to a new audience in a new way, and that was enough for them to make the switch. So your comment, I think it was about Skype and then WhatsApp, right? Fundamentally, they do the same thing, except WhatsApp just went straight for mobile and made the whole experience really easy, and they fixed a problem that was that existed at the time, where there wasn't this cross-platform communicator that was the default go-to on a mobile. Skype just wasn't there. The fact Apple are now in this situation where it could be 2027 at the earliest, it makes me worried, because fast forward 2 years, OpenAI bring out a phone, right? Fast forward 5 years, the whole world's agentic, and actually apps, we're not really using them in the same way we did in the past, because we don't need all that UI anymore. We need it for some things, but by and large, we can get our Starship Enterprise computer, which we pull out of our pocket, projects this holographic display if we need it. It's got MCP plugins, so it can talk to everything in our home, everything in our office. And we can interact with it in natural language. Why do I need an Apple phone anymore? Like you said, it's a brave man say Apple's going to go to zero. You would think that they would have an answer for this, and that that's not kind of their entire business model. But it is a dangerous place to be if you're not innovating in this space. All the other big companies are doing a lot better. Google, Amazon, Meta, Microsoft. Yeah. And Apple have dropped the ball on this. And there's AI native companies like OpenAI and DeepSeek and others that have the potential to get the real jump here.
You have to assume as well, I guess, that Amazon with Alexa and their rewrite, rebuild, whatever it is, that had to go some kind of hybrid model, right? It isn't AI first. You'd have to assume that, I think, because even though it's pretended to be AI for some years, it's been an illusion. The Alexa device, the Alexa experience, is very clever, but it's not AI in the same way. It's the illusion of a personal system, and it works on rails. It has very strict rules about what it can and can't do, and how it behaves and how it doesn't, and what systems it can access and what it can't. It's not, as you say, it can't just shop whatever it likes and rinse the credit card. We've got a very specific expectation on what it's good for and what that experience needs to be. And for them to rip that up and go AI first, we're going to take the guardrails away, off you go, puts that experience, that expectation at risk. Because it's a paradigm shift, isn't it? As we said earlier, it's about making sure the constraints are well enough defined that you can take it off the rails. So I can't believe, and we don't know, but I can't believe they've done that. I can't believe they've taken it entirely off the rails and just given it decent constraints that work. And that's probably actually the model going forward for all organizations that find themselves in this spot, where they're trying to figure out how to apply AI tooling, AI technology, AI concepts to their existing systems. Is where are the opportunities to hybridize this so that some of it stays on rails, and we can trust this bit that's mature, but at the edges there's some areas where we can slowly allow the rails to come off and the constraints to go in place in a controlled way that we feel safe and comfortable with.
Yeah, for those organizations, I think the opportunity is in not trying to bolt this on to an existing system. The opportunity today is to think outside the box and try something new that you couldn't do before, build a proof of concept around thinking differently, reimagine what this system or this business could be from the ground up if it was AI native. Because I think you'll get a lot of learning from that, and you'll understand where actually potentially you can start bringing it into existing processes in a kind of safer way and a more constrained way, while also gaining some insight on the potential as well. We're starting to see this with some of our customers at the moment, and I think that you don't know what's there and what's possible until you lift up the lid and try to figure it out. I think this is the time to do it.
Yeah, I think what has become very clear is what not to do. I think, and you can feel the experience. You can tell the experiences where they've just tried to bolt AI on. In fact, Apple is a very good example about what's happened there. You know how it was when mobile hit. The terrible experiences are ones that would just put the web page in a mobile view. It was like, let's just create a mobile view of the website. Oh, there you go. We've now got
Yeah, and that happened all the time, didn't it?
Yeah, exactly. But that feels like that's what Apple's done with their first attempt at AI. You can highlight a bit of text and a weird bit of UI pops up that says, do you want to, change the tone?
Have you ever used the AI calculator? That looked really cool in the demo, right? Have you ever used it?
Every so often when I'm scribbling on my iPad, I get a little red box turn up where it thinks I'm trying to.
Yeah, but I mean, it looks great. I've never used it.
It's a tech demo. Yeah, I mean, I don't know why you would do that. I guess maybe if you're doing your homework, maybe it'd be useful. But it's a tech demo, isn't it? It feels like this is kind of cool. But I guess I was thinking more about the way you can apply ChatGPT to text boxes within while you're using the iPhone or your iPad or whatever, or even when you're using the Notes app on your Mac and you highlight some text and you get that weird asterisk to pop up.
Oh, that annoys me.
Yeah.
I don't want an asterisk
exactly.
telling me I need to change my workflow all the time. It's so annoying.
So un-Apple. It doesn't make any sense. It gets in the way. It's a bit slow and laggy, and it offers you options you don't want. It's just a bit of AI tech slapped on the side of an existing product, and that's exactly what you should not do. And it's mobile views of websites from 20 years ago.
Yeah, and I remember in those sort of workshop sessions trying to get people to think differently. It's like, look, people come to your website already. That's an information hive. They go there to find out about you, to read about your case studies, to contact you. But when you talk about a mobile app, you have an opportunity here to create a tool that gets stuff done, and there's more than just an information hive. And this was years and years ago, right? But people just needed to broaden their thinking, and I guess that's kind of where we are right now as well. You're going to get frustrated with these interfaces that feel like it's bolted on and unnecessarily just gets in the way. Whereas actually, if you can unlock a new way of doing something and it feels like AI native and it's used in the right way, in the right use case, then that's where it gets exciting.
So you heard it here first. Apple's going to zero. That's the pod.